thought I'd do a video about improving the performance of the cheap Chinese chainsaws you can get on eBay and Amazon. The one I got is a VerPro, the 58cc one, which is actually a bit closer to 54.5 cc's. They're quite talky. I mean, they're clearly very cheaply made, but then they're very cheap. So I certainly wouldn't have one as my only saw, and they're not for the professional user. But as for someone who wants to cut some firewood, they're probably okay. Anyhow, I thought it'd be fun to improve the performance of it, do a bit of porting. It's a very cheap way into getting some practice to do things like that. You can get piston and cylinder kits for as little as £13. So if you make any mistakes, it's a low risk financially. So the first thing I did was replace the chain with an Oregon chain, which improved the performance a little bit. And then my background is with messing with engines to get more power out of them, so I thought I'd give that a go. So apparently the biggest increase, looking on the internet, to increase the performance is to fit bigger carbs, because they come with pretty small carburetors as standard, because I think they make a 45cc, a 52cc nominal, and a 58cc version, and they all come with the same carb, which is this diddy little thing here. Very small butterfly on that. Oddly enough, this elbow here is much lighter. This is one of the things I'd consider changing, but actually that will take, I ported this out, it's quite a rough casting on the inside. That will take a much bigger carburetor. I think these are something like 13mm, so I'm looking at going to sort of 16-17mm, at which point that elbow will still be fine. The one I've seen recommended is the copy of the Husqvarna 365. So I've got one or two of those on order. I've got one coming with the entire, with this manifold bit, the rubber bit that goes to the engine, and the filter, this elbow. So I'll see which of those bits I can utilise. Apparently it's a deeper carb, so you need to shorten the inlet manifold side of it. But that's meant to be the biggest improvement. The other obvious thing is to go for a larger capacity. Now, they don't seem to offer these saws in any bigger than 58cc, which is again 54.5 capacity, which is this cylinder. Oh yeah, here's the piston. So it's quite a rough cast piston. It's an 11mm wrist pin or gudgeon pin, which is going to be important. But there are some 48mm pot and pistons out there. The one I first bought was this one, and as soon again £13 delivered. As soon as if you look at the piston, it's a very similar piston. And you can see the difference between 45.2 and 48mm. but you know, very similar designed. Well, actually, they're not that similar, but there you go. Things. But this cylinder actually doesn't fit. You can tell it's the wrong one because it has the vacuum port as part of the inlet manifold. But it's disappointing really, because if you look at the transfers, they're actually really nice chunky transfer ports. It's quite nice. And I believe this is designed for another Zenoa copy, which is I think the 621. So it's a kind of a pity that doesn't fit. The pretty sure the stud pattern is wrong in it. But anyhow, what I did find another one, another 48mm piston with the same. That's the giveaway, the inlet, which is the same. Not very similar looking things, but there's a couple of problems with it. One is the skirt here is considerably wider, so this will not go on the crankcases without modifying the crankcases. Hence this being apart. So you need to open up these areas, and I took the opportunity to match the size of the transfer ports using the old base gasket, modified base gasket, to so that the whole of the transfer port is exposed, because this transfer port is not entirely exposed by that the stock crankcases. The other thing that, I mean, if you didn't want to spend any money at all but try and get better performance out of this engine, I would definitely recommend taking the cylinder off and removing the base gasket, because the squish I measured on the stock cylinder is it's over 60 thou, so it's pretty excessive. But also the base gasket was actually covering about 10-15% of a transfer port. It's not very accurately cut base gasket. So just by removing that, you could get yourself a good gob of compression and help the gas flow as well. But if you wanted to use this, if you wanted to go from 54.5cc to 61.5cc, and actually these pistons, the piston that comes, it's a flat top piston, so it's a different design. But there's the stock piston and the flat top. I think it looks, it looks a better quality piston, to be honest. But it's not quite so simple. Not only do you have to machine the crankcases, but then these come with a 10mm wrist pin, which is pretty small for an engine that size. Not only that, but the conrod, the gap for the conrod there is considerably wider, even on this 45cm piston, than on this the aftermarket 48mm one. So what I did was I reamed out the wrist pin gap in the piston to 11mm, but that then means you basically don't have any recess for the retainers to go in, the spring clips, the circlips to go in. So I put it on a lathe and turned the retainers in, have little recesses, and then when I went to put it in, I noticed that gap is too small, so I dremeled that and, well, die grinded that and just filed it flat. So now, I mean, it fits in with kind of play I'd want in it. It's not nearly as wide as this, because the conrod, the small end, has some washers either side. So I haven't the patience to take out another 5 mil, let the washers sit in there, 4 or 5 mil, something like that. So at the moment it's just a con rod. So we'll see if the small end bearing puts up with that. So now the piston fits. And I timed the old cylinder. And what really came up with that was, large squish, 63 thou I think it was. And the exhaust time, the inlet timing was fine. My numbers. Yes, the inlet I had 72 degrees before top dead centre. So what's that, 144 degrees of inlet duration. I've heard sort of 155 is about what you should be aiming for, 150, 155, something like that. And I measured the exhaust as about 190, as about 96 after top dead centre, which is pretty hot, I think. It might explain why some of the people who put bigger carbs on had been revving really high. But when I fitted this cylinder, which is a pain in the arse to fit, I got the squish of, let's have a look, 23 thou, which is about 0.55 millimeters, which I'm happy with. That's perfect, I think. Depending on how much, it's 0.55 millimeters before it hits something inside the engine. Depends how much trust you've got in the big and small end bearings and all the rest of it. Not to how much plays in there before it starts hitting something, but it's cheap. What's the worst that's going to happen? You toast it, 60 quid gone. And these non-runners of these could be bought off eBay for very cheap, 20-30 pounds often. And the exhaust timing I got was 100 degrees after top dead centre. So I've ported this to 98 degrees, which I think is sort of sensible. And because I fitted it with no base gasket, so to get that squish of 0.55 millimeters, that's with no base gasket. Obviously that would have retarded the exhaust timing, and it also would increase the duration of the inlet. So at the moment I've got inlet duration of 157 degrees, which I think is pretty hot. So I'm going to leave the inlets have been kept pretty much. I've just tidied them up. The exhaust, I very, very slightly increased the size of it, and then modified the exhaust gasket and the actual exhaust muffler. It's only probably 2.5 millimeters bigger height and width, and again with just increased it's only about a mil, if that, of increased exhaust height. Fiddled around with the transfers. The transfers are not big. The idea, I think, is that when they bored these out, the transfers were the same, and so it leaves very little space. So I'm kind of tempted to take out the middle rib to gain a bit more volume. But if you look at the difference between these two 47mm cylinders, look at the size of the transfer ports. They're hugely bigger in this Zenoa 621 copy. It's also significantly bigger cylinder all round, so presumably better cooling on that as well. Be interesting to see if these could be made to fit. There's no, they're just slightly wider space. I think they're in one dimension. They're the same left to right, but they're slightly wider front to back spacing on this stud. So who knows what could be done with that. Probably not beyond the wit of man to do that. Which I'm sure would give better performance out of the box, because those transfers are relatively twice the size of these. So I might try widening the transfers a bit. It's more to be had from that. Anyhow, so once I've given these a good clean up, I'm going to stick them all together. See how quickly I've decided to set up. I mean, it's a small piece of wood, but to have a fairly consistent bit of wood to time with, I've decided to use. I've got some oak sleepers, just to time how quickly it goes through bits of oak sleeper, 4 by 8 inch. So I've done that with the store as a saw with it as it came with an Oregon chain. I'll do it with this 48, this 61.5 cc 48mm pistoned version with some mild porting and just making sure that there's no gaskets in the way, better compression. I'll give that a go, and then hopefully I'll get the bigger carb soon, so I can try out the bigger carb and freer flowing, more optimized gas flowed inlet. I won't bother doing anything other than opening that up on the exhaust, because there's a few different varieties of these mufflers that come on these saws, because they're basically all the same saw, but they come with different starters, different clutches and things. And this relatively large 2-port exhaust muffler seems to be one that flows the most. I don't think that. I'm not going to bother. I don't want it hugely loud, and I think the muffler probably flows enough. But certainly for the future. The other thing you can do that might be a bit of an upgrade is, again, because they come in different with different branding and with slightly different setups. One thing that's good is, you can get lots of different air filters, and one of the things you can get is a clutch. So that's a stock clutch. It's obviously a cast-in sprocket, but you can get a rim clutch for these. And again, it's like £5 posted or something. So I've got a rim clutch, and these are normally 7-tooth chain sprockets. So I'm hoping I took a didn't know what I was ordering, but I ordered some 8-tooth rim drive sprockets, but I think these are a bit big. So that's, if you can see that, that's the sprocket. So hopefully you can get a bit of a higher chain speed with that. So once I've got that done, I'll do a video testing it, see if it's worthwhile improvement. But I'm hoping it'll end up being like a fun saw to use. It's quite lively and cheap. So if this all goes well, I think the chain was something like £20. You can get this cylinder slightly more expensive, sort of 20 odd pounds. If you've got a lathe to modify the piston, if you're brave enough to get a die grinder to it, that's a possibility. But I mean, I'm glad to go up to larger capacity, because there is no substitute for cubes other than RPM. But if you just wanted to modify the stock one, just take the base gasket out. That'll make a massive difference, I think. So there you go. Thank you.